Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here because our last episode ran a little long, and I thought, let's just break off our last topic, which was reviewing the film Annihilation.
Yeah, because we have sworn never to do another 4-hour podcast.
Yes, and if I can help it, 3 hours.
Yeah.
Special cases we can do it, like Black Panther. But, Annihilation is already like 2 weeks old, and it's probably going to be out of theaters by the time you hear this. So I thought this is kind of an evergreen one. If you saw the movie, if you didn't see the movie, if you're waiting for it to come out on video, I know we have listeners around the world who are about to get it on Netflix because it comes out next week on Netflix. So I might hold this for next week, depending on if we have time to record a show next week. I might just make it a bonus episode for this week. We shall see. I don't know yet. We are in suspense about this, but
this is the most wishy-washy intro we've ever done.
We are,
because we're figuring it out along with the listener.
We are, but we do know we're talking about Annihilation. All right,
are we?
And why are we talking about Annihilation? It's because it's a movie we both saw.
Yes,
it is also a very interesting movie. I don't know if I actually like this movie. I like things about it an awful lot.
Okay,
I think it's a fascinating film. I also think where it fits in a moment we have been having this decade in film, where I think easily the most significant Hollywood, American film genre has been science fiction in the 2010s. If you look at the string of movies we have had throughout this decade of speculative and far-off science fiction that has done really interesting things, I don't know if you can point to any other one period where this many interesting adult artistic films in this genre were being made, and Annihilation is one of those. But it's also of a kind that doesn't get made over here much. This is much more similar to like Soviet science fiction. Obviously, many people have compared it to Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker, and it is Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker in its basic plot, and in its style, it is very Tarkovsky-esque, while taking things from also, I would say, like John Carpenter and how it does some of the body horror, and even recent sci-fi films from this decade, like Under the Skin. It has a lot of, I think it gets some of its boldness from maybe those kinds of images, but or even stuff like, it is clearly also of an aesthetic piece with like last year's Twin Peaks: The Return in a lot of ways. But it is a really interesting film to talk about, and so I wanted to make sure we get some time to talk about it, and it's winding up getting its own episode.
Yeah.
So there you go. Sean, that's kind of my basic opening salvo on why I want to talk about it. What about you?
Yeah, this was a movie that just sort of, I think, like as with most people, just kind of like popped up on my radar out of nowhere because it just kind of didn't really get any marketing. Like, I literally didn't even see the trailer for this movie. Like, it was just, I had heard about it on Twitter, just sort of like by people talking about, oh, this movie's really cool. And the little bits I heard about it sounded like this movie would be very much my kind of shit. And and as I kind of talked about on the last episode that we recorded with the Mario shit and all that stuff, because I have no idea when this podcast is coming out. I don't know if it was actually the last episode, but the last one that we recorded, I sort of talked about, I had a very busy weekend. I was just sort of like, kind of like hitting a mental block with some stuff I needed to do, and just decided I needed to get out of the house and do something else. And so I just was like, hey, Dad, you want to go see a movie? And my dad and I went and saw Annihilation at the Denver West movie theater. Of the 2 movie theaters that are near my house, there's one called the Colorado Mills Theater, which is in a big mall that was shut down for like almost an entire year, and I'm kind of concerned about that, where that mall is going to go in the near future.
It's going to be demolished. That's what's going to happen in that mall, and it's amazing it hasn't happened 10 years ago.
Yeah, but then there's a Denver West Theater. Both of these are Regal theaters, so this is like, this maybe isn't interesting to anybody to listen to, but I had not been in that Denver West Theater for years, because all the movies that, like, nobody sees gets thrown in the Denver West Theater because it's about like 20 years older than the Colorado Mills Theater, and I was like, almost like forgot, like almost made the wrong turn. I was like, oh wait, right, I'm going to the other one, which actually has nicer chairs, which I was very surprised to discover.
It's a nice little theater. Sometimes they fuck things up, but it's a nice little theater.
It's better than the Colorado Mills Theater,
yes, it is.
Which is nice to discover. But yeah, so anyways, that was sort of, I don't usually get out to see movies that much. If I do, it's usually just to see comic book movies because I like them and they're fun to talk about on the podcast. I was like, fuck it, I'm going to see an actual, like, I'm going to be an adult and go see an adult person movie and go see Annihilation because it seemed like it would be very much my shit. And it is very much my shit. It is not, I'm not as effusive about it as a lot of people I've seen on the internet be. I like it a lot. I think I probably like it more than you do. But I do have problems with it. I think it's kind of a movie that there are things you could have done with this, like in like the editing and stuff, to make it a lot more focused. And I think there's just some of the stuff they do with the characters. The movie just meanders a bit, and I think like when it is very focused on what it is good at, both aesthetically and with the sort of like broader thematic kind of like symbolic storytelling stuff it does, when it's focused on that, it's really fucking good. When it gets away from that, it gets a bit tedious to me.
Yeah, and I'm curious which parts you're talking about, because I have a similar thing, but we might be talking about totally different things in the movie.
Sure.
I have seen this movie twice, and it wasn't necessarily because like I loved it so much I had to go see it again. But the first time I went to see it, I had been hearing all these great things about it, and I had a long work day where I had a class I needed to teach in the morning and a class I was teaching in the afternoon, and I had like a 4-hour break in the middle, and this was pretty far away from my home, and I didn't want to go home in that 4-hour break because it would eat up most of my time.
Right.
And there was an AMC theater nearby, and I don't usually go to AMCs, not because I dislike them, they're just usually far away, but I'm like, they're showing Annihilation at 2 o'clock or whatever, I'll just go watch Annihilation. And it was very nice to just go, that was a good place to hang out for a couple hours.
Right, yeah.
It was a little weird going and having to teach a class after seeing this movie, because my brain was a little muddled after it.
It's a movie you have to process a little bit after you see it.
Yes. And I have to say, AMC, you got to step up your game. You have such beautiful auditoriums. You have huge screens. You actually mask your screens, which is awesome because no one else does anymore. At least the big chains don't. And do they mask the screens at Regal still?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not as sensitive about that as you are.
Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. It's
I
weird.
feel like they did at Denver West, and I feel like they usually don't at Mills, but that might just...
That could be totally true, by the way.
I might have just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I wasn't paying that much attention.
West is an older theater, so it should actually have more infrastructure for that.
Yeah.
Anyway. But yeah, so that's a whole weird thing. But anyway, they mask their screens. It all looks, they have these beautiful projectors, great sound, great seating, all this stuff. And they must have not changed the bulb in the projector I was watching that movie on in like 9 months. It was the dimmest movie. Like, it looked like if I turned my computer down to the lowest brightness setting and let's watch Annihilation that way. That's what it felt like. And so this movie has... One of the most important things about it is its use of color.
Yeah.
And you could barely make out some of those colors.
Yeah. And there are significant stretches of the movie take place when it's pretty dark and like at night and stuff. Including like one of the more like interesting like tense scenes is pretty dark.
So that was frustrating to begin with, and I was like, I kind of want to see it again in a better theater, but I'm not going to make myself necessarily. But I walked out of it feeling like this was very interesting. I have a lot of thoughts on it. I need to sit with it. I found the first hour fairly tedious.
Yeah.
I think it gets better as it goes along, and I think the last half hour of this is perfect. I think it's a perfect final half hour, and I wish the rest of the movie was more like it.
That is exactly how I feel about the movie,
yes. So, but we'll get into that. But my second viewing, I do think it seeds into that last half hour better than I was thinking. It builds into it in very interesting ways. But I saw it a second time because I didn't know my little brother even like knew about this movie and wanted to see it, but he did. And I was like, oh, well, then we should go see it together at some point, because I kind of want to see it again for multiple reasons, because I also just didn't quite know what to think about the whole thing, which is good sometimes. It's nice to have a movie that you don't have an immediate one reaction to.
Right.
So we went to see it at our favorite theater, which is the Harkins Theater in Northfield. This is also a tour of Sean and Jonathan talking about movie theaters.
Yes.
But I can recommend the best theaters in Colorado to you. This is the best one. It's called the Harkins Northfield 18. All their theaters are great. Their staff is great. Their concessions are on the cheaper side. Just the best theater in Denver. They have the Cine Capri, which is the best auditorium. This was not playing there because this movie is not big enough for it.
No, again, this was showing at the Denver West, not the Mills.
Yes. So anyway, went to see it there. Looked much better, looked much brighter. And the second time it was very interesting because I found myself vacillating on the film in totally different ways than I did the first time, enjoying things I hadn't quite reacted to, like finding myself more bored with things I'd liked the first time or baffled by some decisions. Some things came into clearer focus, some didn't. This movie, while watching it, I get the same feeling as one of the central visuals of the movie, which is this swirling, nebulous, mysterious thing that you can't quite pin down. And I kind of think that's what the movie is, and I think some of that is on purpose, and I think some of that is through some problems with the movie. But I do think it's a fascinating film to talk about.
Okay.
All right.
Well, let's talk about it.
Spoilers from here on out. Spoiling this movie is kind of a weird thing because Natalie Portman fights an alien kind of thing at the end.
The kind of alien version of herself, yeah.
Yeah, so like, as I was saying, this is more like... So the sci-fi canon that we're building in the 2010s, I should say, I don't know if I can even list all these, but off my top of my head, you have things like Under the Skin by Jonathan Glazer, which this is a lot like. Her by Spike Jonze, which is sci-fi of a very more, human, down-to-earth variety. Gravity by Alfonso Cuarón.
Yeah.
The Martian by Ridley Scott. Those are the kind of the big budget ones. You've got Blade Runner 2049. You've got the Arrival, both by Johan Johansson's a composer, late composer now, sadly. I meant Denis Villeneuve. You have... we've talked about a bunch of these on this podcast. You have Alex Garland's other movie, Ex Machina.
Oh, right,
which is great. Have you ever seen that?
No.
You should. It's even better than you would like it, I think. Any others that there's Interstellar by Christopher Nolan.
Interstellar, yeah. And then there's some that are like slightly like artsy and stuff, but stuff like Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow, sure. Yeah, more pulpy pop sci-fi. Yeah, I'm sure I've made a list of these before, but there have been many, many of these over the last few years. Just smart, adult, and sometimes even smart, poppy, pulpy science fiction. And it's been a really interesting genre to explore over this decade, because I think you get at least one or two of these a year that feel like significant. Like, I do think there is going to be, in a future film class, people are going to do sci-fi of the 2010s.
Yeah.
And that will be a significant genre. And I think Annihilation will be an entry in that. I don't think it's going to be, I think clearly its rollout was sort of botched and people aren't generally paying attention to it. I also don't think there's any version of this movie that would get any mainstream traction. Right. I do think it will get a certain level of academic traction as part of this movement. But as I said, it also stands apart from those in having this sort of Soviet sci-fi bent to it, where it very much takes more from a Tarkovsky side of things than a Kubrick side of things. Like, I think the default a lot of people compare sci-fi to is like, if it's sci-fi and it's slightly odd, they compare it to 2001. I don't really think Annihilation is anything like 2001.
I think you can make like vague comparisons, but that's not where I would immediately go.
No, because it's such a different beast. It really does feel more like a Tarkovsky thing, where it has this philosophical humanist streak. The way it views nature as this ambivalent force is very Tarkovsky-esque, very much like Solaris or Stalker. The basic plot setup of there's this mysterious zone that a team has to go in and find a room in the middle of it. That is the plot to Stalker.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's stealing from that. If you're going to steal from the best. Andrei Tarkovsky, it's pretty good. And even some of Tarkovsky's other films, it has some of the way it weaves in flashbacks and stuff is somewhat similar to his film Mirror, which is very experimental and weird. But it borrows more from sort of that tradition. It definitely has some more American sci-fi undercurrents to it. Like the body horror is super Carpenter-esque, I think. And then there's some stuff that I think is Garland's own stuff. And I think a lot of the relationship stuff and how he frames that, some of the musical choices, it's an interesting blend. But that means that this is a sci-fi movie that is not particularly propulsive. It is very slow. It is very much about building a tone and a tension, an internal tension within. And when it does that and nails those things, I love it. Yeah. I do think there are certain things I can point to that I think break some of those internal tones and tensions to me. Does that kind of match with what you're thinking about the movie?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah. So, I'll just say up front, I first time did not know kind of what to make of the whole Oscar Isaac, Natalie Portman relationship and the flashbacks. And on a second viewing, I really liked all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's like a really... I think it could have been executed slightly better, but in terms of the narrative, I think it's really smart the way that it sort of, I think, changes your understanding of the motivations of the Natalie Portman character.
Yes, and this movie is a closed loop because it starts where it ends, and seeing it a second time really helped me with especially the Oscar Isaac, Natalie Portman stuff. I just like that stuff way better. I think the way those flashbacks are weaved in is beautiful. I like that they are so out of chronology. I like that it never comes out and says, this is what happened, and this is her motivation. It's just these little fractals of her memory that you go into, and you piece together some of those things as you head towards the end. And I think the central theme of this movie about this couple that disintegrates and rebuilds, and having that as the stand-in for this larger sci-fi process that's going on of disintegration and rebuilding, is the strongest thing about the movie. And I think there's a lot of it's not a long movie, it's only 2 hours, but I think there's a lot of fat around that basic theme that keeps pushing you away from it.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, because I love all the actors in this movie, there's two characters who matter, and it's Natalie Portman and it's Oscar Isaac.
Yeah.
And every other character in this movie is out of a different movie, and each of those characters is out of a separate different movie. And some of them are good, like Jennifer Jason Leigh is the lead scientist.
Right, the psychiatrist.
Yeah,
lady.
the psychiatrist. Yeah. Great performance, aggressively weird performance.
Yes.
She is so weirdly detached and everything. I think she comes the closest to feeling like she's in this movie. But then Tessa Thompson doesn't get to be a character. She's just we are told through bad exposition that she cuts herself.
Yeah. That's
Tessa Thompson.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
You have Russian lady who is there to give exposition and then die. And you have Gina Rodriguez, who is out of a Michael Bay movie. And
right. And she's the one that's supposed to be an alcoholic.
Yes.
But that is told to you.
That is told to you. She's just the whole tone of that performance and how it's written and the placement in the movie just... Because this kind of movie relies on a very specific pace and tone. And just that performance style is not the style of what Natalie Portman is doing. And Natalie Portman is not doing the same kind of style as Jennifer Jason Leigh. And you can mix different performance styles in a movie. This kind of, go watch a Tarkovsky film or something that he's drawing from. Part of why those very unique atmospheres work is because everyone is on the exact same page of what kind of performance they're giving. This one, to me, the biggest issue is it's all over the map, and those other characters so fundamentally do not matter to the movie.
Yeah, that is basically my core issue with it as well. That it's something that I see and understand what they're trying to do. They're building this cast of characters that are, again, this is just something the movie tells you, that are self-destructive in different ways, that are suicidal, or they engage in these behaviors that destroy themselves and that are bad for them, but they can't avoid doing. And it's I think that's a good, it matches with the themes of the movie. That's not a bad idea. The execution's really weird because so much of that is just told to you in a couple of scenes of exposition, and very little of it feels like it's actually organically developed over the course of the movie. And there's some bits of it, when the Tessa Thompson character disappears into the forest of flower people and becomes a plant person herself. That's a great little narrative moment, but it's not built up to satisfactorily.
It's a great payoff to a non-existent character arc.
Exactly. It feels like there was, and I have no idea if any stuff was cut, some major stuff was cut from the movie, but it feels like there was stuff cut from the movie. Not in the sense of there's that big time gap when they entered. That's not what I mean when stuff was cut. That was supposed to be disorienting. And there's just stuff in the middle of the journey that feels like we were supposed to, as an audience, be exposed to certain character arcs and narrative concepts that we are kind of briefly told about, and it never develops that. And then those characters resolve very quickly and suddenly in the plot to then lead us on to the next plot point with the main character Natalie Portman. And it's something of it ends up feeling those characters should have either I don't know if you could completely cut them. Obviously, you couldn't just cut them from the shooting of the movie, but from the screenplay, I think it would be hard to have Natalie Portman be the only character in the movie with given the plot structure. But
they go in with, what is it, 5 people? Natalie Portman,
yeah.
Tessa Thompson, Gina, I guess 4. Okay,
yeah.
2 maybe 3. It's too, because here's the thing. Even if you did 3-hour cut of this movie where you really get into all the characters and you see it, you don't just say it. Because almost all the exposition you laid out is in one scene when Russian lady and Natalie Portman are on a boat going down the river. And this is a really good movie in a lot of ways. That is a terrible scene.
Yeah.
Because it exists solely to give you exposition on all the other characters, and all they're doing is rowing in a boat, and that actually could be a very interesting visual aesthetic moment, and it just has to be on them talking. It's a really awkward scene.
And it is just the way they talk feels so inhuman, and I think I understand what they're going for of these people are already assuming they're going to die, and that's why they're so... She's so upfront with her own personal traumas, but I don't think they do quite enough to sell me on that of her just being yes, and my daughter died, but 2 people died that day, my daughter and myself. It's wait, what?
Awful.
What?
This movie, I said this on Twitter, it would be so much better if it had 2/3 less dialogue. This movie should be primarily silent. But anyway,
because when it is primarily silent, it's fucking like crackerjack. It's so good.
It's amazing, yes. And it's weird because Ex Machina, his previous film, is the opposite. Not the opposite in that, like, when it's silent, it's bad. I just mean that it's a primarily dialogue-driven drama, and it's really well done. And Alex Garland is a writer. Like, he's written a bunch of Danny Boyle movies, like Sunshine, 28 Days Later. He wrote Dredd, the good Judge Dredd movie, which actually just yesterday Carl Urban came out and said Alex Garland actually directed that movie. The actual director didn't do anything on it. So, kind of funny. Maybe Garland had more to do with it. But he's a talented writer. I just think, and this is a well-written movie, accepting that writing is more than just dialogue. Yeah. The dialogue is clunky. But what I was going to say is that even if you had all the more stuff with the other characters and really fleshed them out, I still think that would be a distraction because they don't have anything to do with the Natalie Portman character. Like, she doesn't know them. She doesn't get particularly distraught about what happens to them over the course of this journey because she has bigger things to worry about. And, you know, the arc of the film, what this film is about, is a woman who loses her husband before she even loses him physically.
Yeah.
Who he comes back transformed. She goes through a process of transformation, and they reunite transformed. It's why the ending is so perfect. It's a very precise way to end the movie. Yeah. And all that other stuff is kind of fluff around it. What you need are characters who can act as mirrors on the Natalie Portman character and further that. Like, this needs to be more of a singular, focused-minded movie. It's not an ensemble film. Yeah. And it makes the mistake in certain parts of deciding it's going to be an ensemble film. And so you get things like where you have these whiplashy effects, like the scene where Gina Rodriguez knocks out Natalie Portman and ties them all up and is shouting at them about lying. That feels like it's out of a different movie.
Yeah, that feels like that's like a zombie, like 28 Days Later kind of scene.
Yes.
That's like a very cliche zombie movie scene, but then it leads to one of the best scenes in the movie.
Which is dialogue-free, other than this weird creature that you would normally see in like an anime or something that has subsumed the Russian lady. It's that mutated bear. It has her voice and this scene of like horrific tension and violence. And so, yeah, you get this whiplash effect where it's like, I just am kind of bored out of my mind for 2 or 3 minutes, and then it's like, oh, this is really interesting. So the movie does overall kind of feel like a compromised version of itself to me. And, you know, when you have the conversation about what did Paramount do wrong with this, I don't know. In this form, I don't know what I would do with Annihilation, because I also think there were probably studio pressures throughout that led to having the ensemble focus that we have. Mm-hmm. But the movie that was made is kind of split in some ways, and I think even best case scenario, this wasn't going to be an Arrival or a Her or a Gravity, where it's like it's certainly not Gravity, which is a huge hit, but like an Arrival or a Her, which is like a good, modest sci-fi hit that got some mainstream traction. It's an art house thing, you know, and sadly a studio movie made at this relatively modest budget can't just go out for an art house release. Yeah. So it's a weird scenario. But yeah, I do think that is, getting back to that focus with the characters, it does constantly feel like when you get into stuff with the other characters, it's a weird distraction.
Yeah, that the movie's like in this weird, like it's waffling in this weird middle place between being like this bigger ensemble story that develops all the characters and is kind of about all of them, and it's using them to explore different lenses of the sort of self-destructive, suicidal, like depressive transformation and like traumatic transformations that they go through. And so it's like it kind of wants to be that in certain moments, but can't commit the time to do it because it is also this like very focused story about this like main character and her relationship with her husband and her transformative experience. It is like so focused on that it can't dedicate the time to either one of them. And so it's like, when it does focus on that one main character, that is when it's at its best, for sure. So I think, that's like the more ideal version of the movie that we get is one that understands that like the rest of the characters need to be more sort of like narratively disposable in some ways, and like you said, are reflections of and are like secondary commentaries on the main character instead of trying to make them more fleshed out full characters themselves.
And it's, you know, even, again, comparing this to Ex Machina, that is I think there's only 3 actors in that whole movie. Like, that's a 3-hander. It's Oscar Isaac, it's Alicia Vikander, and it's Domhnall Gleeson. And I feel like this could have had a similar, like, tight focus somewhere in it of You want Oscar Isaac, you want Natalie Portman, even though he's not there in the present scenes.
Yeah.
And you probably need someone to go in there with her so that it's not just her.
Yeah. Like the Jennifer Jason Leigh character, like I think she's the one that works the best for me.
Yeah,
which also makes she's also the one that is around for the longest.
Yes, and I think you see more of her. I think they show more than they tell you with her character. Basically because Jennifer Jason Leigh is that good of an actress and can kind of do it.
Yeah.
But she also gets to be around the longest. She has this just weird affectation to everything she does.
She also has like several scenes with the Natalie Portman character like that build up their relationship even before they go into the zone, and then once they are in the zone, those two characters also have the most interaction.
Technically the Shimmer, the zone is the Superman Stalker.
Yes.
It's okay.
Because it's like the Stalker movie and the Stalker video game. So
Yes.
it's like I'm more used to the zone.
It's okay. But yes, when they go into the Shimmer or the zone. But yeah, I also think like Jennifer Jason Leigh gets a payoff too, in that she is the thing that explodes into a glorious ball of light at the end of the movie.
Is she also the one who like gives the title drop, or is that Natalie Portman?
I think that's Jennifer Jason
Yeah, I
Leigh.
think she gets the one that gets to say Annihilation, which I was not expecting this movie to have a fucking huge title drop in its like climactic moments.
It would be like if in one of the scenes in Blade Runner 2049, someone was like to Ryan Gosling, like, "What are you?" And he's like, "I'm a Blade Runner, and it's 2049, bitch."
Yeah,
that was just it's really awkward, and it doesn't work. But it's kind of because Jennifer Jason Leigh does it, and her performance is so aggressively odd. It kind of
I liked it. It's like. I liked it enough that I was like, they should have titled the movie something differently if they had this line in it, because like it's a good line in that moment. It feels cheapened by the fact that it is also the title of the movie.
Yes. So yeah, and again, like they tell you the thing about how her character has cancer, but I like that that is a piece of exposition that I feel like they could have done more elegantly somewhere. But you get the sense that something is wrong with this woman outside of that.
You get to know her before they tell you that she has cancer, so that when they say that, you're like, oh, that makes so much sense about why she reacts in this way.
And she's actually an interesting counterpoint to Portman.
Yeah.
Because maybe she has demons in her closet, we don't know. But from what we are seeing, this is not some self-inflicted wound she's carrying around. This is, not that depression and those things are self-inflicted wounds. I just mean that it's not from an outside factor. She got a disease in her body and is falling apart from that. And so she just has a fundamentally slightly different worldview on all this. And that is an interesting contrast, whereas... I mean, we know nothing. Okay, Gina Rodriguez is an alcoholic, I guess. We hear that once. It has nothing to do with anything else. Tessa Thompson has cut herself, but we don't even see the evidence of that until near the end. And Russian Lady is there for exposition. A good performance. I actually like that character. But like none of them, you can't say how they contrast or compare because they're total blanks.
Yeah, because it's also stuff like specifically like you feel like the alcoholic character. There's like moments where they could have done something with it, with like the the core narrative conceit of the Shimmer / the Zone being this thing that rapidly evolves and transforms you from like the DNA. And you like genetically are transforming the longer you stay in there. And it feels like that would be something that they do this with the lady that cuts herself, that these, the trees and flowers and stuff start planting like and growing from her scars. So at least they do something with that conceit that fits in some way or references in some way what is supposed to be your self-destructive behavior. And with the alcoholic lady, there's like she stares at her hands a little bit and is like, my hands are kind of funky. And that's like...
That has nothing to do with...
Yeah, is that like the clothes... Because I was like desperately trying to figure out, like in some of those scenes when she's doing the zombie movie thing where she goes crazy, like, what is that? Is that like because people who are alcoholics get the shakes? Like what is that? Like what is the thing that refers to that behavior?
And Russian Lady having a dead daughter has... Like, it's never even close to referenced again.
Yeah. Because she's also the one that just gets murdered halfway through the movie. So,
but they also like she's the one they all clearly really like her because she's nice and motherly and everything. But yeah, it's a weird arc, and I don't want to dwell on it too much. But it is, I think, every time you get back to one of those characters, like I even remember like both times I watched it, I was pretty into the beginning of the movie until you get to that first scene with all of them at the table together and she meets them all.
That feels like it's like a scene from Aliens.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, like it's like all the Marines like doing like the fucking like 5 fingers like fillet thing, and it's like, hey, get over here, Ripley.
I mean, specifically Gina Rodriguez. I said a Michael Bay movie. I should have said Aliens, a James Cameron movie, because she is the Latino character from Aliens.
Yeah, the Marine from Aliens.
Just feels like that person, and that's Aliens is a very different piece of sci-fi, Yeah, so that's a little weird. Yeah, there's even that also, the scene where she meets them all has one of the worst lines, which is Gina Rodriguez comes over and is like she hits on Natalie Portman, and then they're like, oh, why were you doing that? And she's like, oh, well, we don't know if we're going to live. And it's clearly Alex Garland trying to say, I hit two birds with one stone there. I revealed that she's gay and that they're going on a suicide mission. And it's like, that was not elegant. I don't think that's how people act.
Yeah.
So, yeah, kind of weird. Let's talk about what's good, though. Because as I said, up to that point, because that's just such a break in the tone, but I do love this there is this slow, dreadful, kind of mournful atmosphere to this whole thing. And it's there right from the start, where, you have those initial scenes of the shimmer, which are kind of interesting.
Yeah, like the asteroid impacting near where the lighthouse is.
And it's done completely with the the guitar music, which is, I love when they do that as kind of a tonal juxtaposition. I really like the scene where Natalie Portman is painting the bedroom and Oscar Isaac comes back, and I forget the song they're playing, but it's like a folk kind of thing, and it's that's just a beautiful, interesting scene. And again, no dialogue. It's so good when there's no dialogue, because you just feel that aesthetic experience of this woman in mourning, in between things, the weirdness of this man transformed coming home. All of that sort of thing works. And I actually think the best dialogue in the movie is between Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaac, because I think Alex Garland and then the two actors find this kind of easy comfort and rapport between the two that still feels stilted in the right ways. Because the writing in this kind of movie does need to be stilted to create this kind of tone.
Yeah.
But there's just a certain kind of stilted, and when it's... They have this very kind of dry, mechanical way of talking to each other. That sort of thing. They also have this conversation later in the movie where they're in bed together and they talk about God and creation and that aging is actually a genetic mistake. And that is thematic expositional dialogue. I actually think it works with those two.
Yeah, it feels like two people talking about this thing that we've and it feels, because also specifically the way it's presented in this flashback structure feels like it's not exposition because the character is telling you, the viewer, this stuff. It's the God perspective that we are given cuts to that moment because that moment is important for us to know. Yes. It's those are two really different things.
Yes, it's a small... You're absolutely right. It's not that the writing is all that different. It's a functional difference of how you present it, right? Yeah. And that's what's so important about the whole flashback structure, and that it's non-linear. It means that whenever you cut to something, there's a motivated piece of character psychology that sends us there, and that's what's so good about those scenes between them. Also, Oscar Isaac is Oscar Isaac.
Yeah.
And, let's not discount
a very charismatic dude. You buy into him immediately, whether he's, very nice and charming or he's weird and creepy.
I mean, I don't, this is a movie, driven by female performances and a lot of great actresses, and I'm loath to kind of say this because of that. I do think Oscar Isaac gives the best performance in the movie, just in
sure,
he has this weird, crazy background role, and how much he hangs over things, both in the nice, cool husband she had, and then later on all the stuff he does in the two videotaped scenes.
God, yes, yeah.
It's the one where he cuts the guy open, and the one at the end where he kills himself after giving the little monologue with a southern accent he didn't have before. It's a great supporting, and it's the definition of a supporting performance, because by no means is it the centerpiece of the movie. It's just such a good performance in all of those ways.
But it is something that it is important because so much of that supporting performance is central to a lot of the behaviors of your main character. And so him. You being able to buy the relationship between him and Natalie Portman so easily in the handful of flashback scenes you get, when they're a relatively normal couple, that's really important. And then also him being able to sell how much that relationship is utterly transformed after his experience in the Shimmer. It's a great performance.
Yeah, and Natalie Portman too. I don't want to. She's very good in this. I don't think it's her best work, and I don't know if it's the kind of role that entirely suits her as well as some others. I still think her high watermark is Black Swan,
right? Yeah,
where just she has a way of doing kind of I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but she has a very guarded level of weirdness and histrionics, so she can get into things. She's kind of a stealth crazy person in some of her best performances.
Yeah, I can see that.
And, this is much more of a sober, kind of quiet, in some cases very kind of avant-garde thing where she is the focus of the camera, but things are more happening to her than she is driving action in that sort of sense. I don't think this is as revelatory a performance in that way as like Scarlett Johansson going and doing Under the Skin, and I'm like, I never saw you in that way in many ways, because you become a weird, crazy alien thing with black skin and burn alive at the end of that. Sorry, spoiler.
It's okay. I already know that.
Yeah, so it's like, this is crazy. I didn't think of you that way, ScarJo. I'm scared of you now. I don't come out of this thinking that, but I do think it's a very effective performance from her overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a step up from Jane and Thor.
From Jane and Thor. Yes.
It's like I think you read that like this movie doesn't use Natalie Portman in the best way possible, but it is like she gives a strong performance.
Yeah, but it is a better use of Natalie. Actually, Jane and Thor is a good example of, because I think this is in the right direction for Natalie Portman. I just don't know 100%. Because Jane and Thor is like using her as just a normal, like, the girlfriend in the movie actress.
Yeah.
That's like, I think Star Wars also taught us that's not really what Natalie Portman is. Like, I think you have to have some kind of weirder meat on the, I shouldn't even say weirder, but deeper meat on the bones. Whether that is the batshit insanity of Black Swan, where she thrived because she looks so normal on the surface, and so kind of put together, and she shows the cracks in this person showing, or if it's something where she just has to display a very, like, fierce, obvious intelligence, which I think is the best reason for her to be in this movie, because I 100% buy Natalie Portman as, like, a brilliant biologist.
Yeah.
Because this is a woman who, like, speaks 4 languages and has a Harvard degree and all this. Like, quit acting for several years to go get her, master's at Harvard. Not many actors do that after being in Star Wars, right?
Right, yeah.
And that shines through in her work. That's probably the best thing about her work in Thor, is I believe Jane is very smart. I don't necessarily 100% believe Jane is this into Thor, but that's a different thing, So, no, she's very good. We talked about Jennifer Jason Leigh. Getting back to the side characters for just a second, I love Tessa Thompson. She's a great actress. She was amazing in Thor as Valkyrie, in Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
She's in Creed. She's really great in that, and I'm sure she's in other things I'm forgetting about. I will say that it's a testament to how much this movie wastes her. I didn't realize it was Tessa Thompson until the credits rolled.
Me neither.
And I was like, she's not an unrecognizable actress. I don't think of her as particularly, like, chameleonic into things. Like, she's got a presence, and it was like, I didn't know who you were. I thought it was someone like an unknown,
Yeah.
And it's like, it's weird. It's just a bizarre use of that actress, I think. I don't know. But yes. Where else should we go with this? I mean, let's talk about the stuff in the Shimmer.
Okay, yeah.
And how that's put together. Because it definitely comes to a head in the last 30 minutes, but you do have these nice spikes in it throughout where, describing what we think the movie does best. I think it's I think this movie is directed fantastically for the most part. I think the cinematography is great, and it is smart, and they are consistently making the most intelligent and interesting shot compositions within the quiet weirdness of this world. Because until the last, like, half hour, it's only very sporadically do crazy visual things happen.
Yeah.
But, like, just the shimmers of color and the uneasiness of this forest that doesn't look quite right, and that most of the weird things are not CGI, they're like flowers plastered on the walls and stuff, and that slow building tension, especially when it's quiet and the music is ambient. There's something really special about all that.
Yeah, it is like when it is like in this interesting sort of like I wouldn't quite call this a horror movie, but it is one of those
horror-esque.
Like, it's horror-esque, and it like plays with I think some of like the directorial like conventions that go to horror in specific scenes. Particularly the bear scene is like the most obviously like this is a horror movie sequence. But yeah, I think it does like so much of quietly being able to build tension just with that, like how things are slightly off in different ways. That like is like very subtle early on, and it's mostly about like, having like the shimmer in the sky whenever you get a brief glimpse through the trees of like the bubble that they're in, and then it's like a little bit of obviously the more obvious things like the giant fucking albino alligator and shit like that. But like, just having like this weird array of different flowers like all over the place that don't like look like they looks like you're in a botanical garden or something, because these flowers do not go together, and that's something that you kind of get a little bit of dialogue from Natalie Portman sort of telling you that, but it's something you can see immediately that like it just has an immediate visual impact of this is unlike, like, if I go in the walk in the woods, I would not see this. in like a very like basic level. Like nature doesn't quite look like that.
Yeah, and I all those in between moments, like building up to the crazy shit or in between the crazy shit, those are some of the most effective things. And I actually wish there was a little more of it, of just quiet moving through this world, observing them, kind of like in Twin Peaks: The Return. You remember the scene in one of those? It's the episode where they go, the sheriff and everyone go to investigate the like hole in the ground where they think they're going to get the portal, and it's that really long walk through the forest to get there. More of that.
Yes.
More of just that quiet dread building kind of thing, I think would be good. You know, some of the exposition here about how the science of it works, I do like, because I like it. They consistently tie it back into some element of biology and cellular division and real science that makes it feel weighty, and I do like those moments a lot. I should say, while we're on the topic of cinematography, just in case I forget it, the best composition in this entire movie, it's an amazing shot, isn't anywhere in The Shimmer. It's at the end when Natalie Portman, we get back to Benedict Wong, is interrogating her.
Right, yeah.
I should say, I love Benedict. I don't know if this is a waste of Benedict Wong, because I don't know where else he would be in the movie, but I'm sad that we have Benedict Wong and he's only in that one room. Because he's so good.
He's very good, though, in that one room as this weird
really good
science interrogating guy that you kind of like don't quite know what he's doing, like what he's working for, what he's trying to get at for like
I just want more Benedict Wong in things, I think, is the basic takeaway.
That's fair enough.
But yes, but anyway, she's being they finish the interrogation. She takes a drink of water, which is significant because it's when Oscar Isaac early on takes a drink of water that he starts to bleed out of every orifice. And she takes the drink and puts it down. And in this big widescreen composition, we have the glass mid-center frame. And there's this like thing of water on the side of it from where she drank. And it starts to split. And it splits across into two strands of water. And it cuts right after it comes to the middle and the last split happens. Like a sort of... It's an obvious visual metaphor of some kind of cellular division thing.
Yeah.
But it is done just completely silently. She puts the glass down. This weird kind of blurry frame of that in. Again, the widescreen of it is one of the most amazing things about it. And it just like... I almost wanted the movie to cut there because it's such a perfect like visual like punctuation mark for the movie.
Right, yeah.
But there's a lot of really smart shots like that.
Definitely.
Where visual symbolism is something this movie does fantastically well throughout.
Yeah, in both in like subtle ways like that, and then like less subtle ways of, you know, because once you start getting deeper into The Shimmer, you have like that very Last of Us-y kind of stuff of just like the dude fucking like encrusted into the side of the swimming pool with like his chest blown out and just like crawling up the sides of the wall in like fungus, just like fucking yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yes,
that whole scene when they get to the mess hall and they find the video. One, that video is just an amazing sequence where it's Oscar Isaac with this weird smile on his face being like, it'll be okay, and cutting in like, that's gnarly. Like, I don't usually get that grossed out by this. I was like in my seat going, oh, like leaning back, like hand over my mouth, like, because it's like, he's like pulling on the skin like it's a flap on something. Like, it is, like he just cuts the guy's whole like belly off.
Because it's the kind of thing that, you know, like there are scenes like this. It's like it reminds me of like John Carpenter's The Thing or something like that. It's like you've seen scenes like this in a horror movie, but there's something about like I felt like I was expecting it to be more like a scene in a war movie of like, you know, it's like, oh, we got to get this thing out of you, and it's like, you know, the guy like the Oscar Isaac character would be like very like you know, has to do this, but like cares about this guy so much, and instead it's just like, check out this fucking shit, dude. This is whack. Like, I'm gonna cut this fucking dude open and pull his skin out. I was like, there's a fucking snake in here. Holy shit. That's fucking awesome, right? Look at this.
But that's also part of it, is that it's like, it's the mundanity of it, that the guy just lets him cut him open like that. And then it's what's inside. It doesn't drop the ball on the payoff. He's got a slithering snake as his insides now.
Yeah, it's fucking good.
It is.
That seat's nuts.
And like, I also love, this is part of why I love the Oscar Isaac character so much, is how fundamentally inscrutable he is from beginning to end, in that like you never really know what happened to him in The Shimmer and where he's coming from. And that is also one of my favorite things about this movie, is how much it leaves to the imagination. And one of that is here is where he's like, something happened where he has some like really profound interest in all of this, because when he puts his hand in there and is holding the snake thing and just turns and like smiles to the camera, it's like, okay, whatever happened to him was at least a slightly different experience than what Natalie Portman and friends are going through.
Yes, yeah, they're having a bit more of an extreme time.
As you can say that.
Yeah.
It is nutso. And then they go to the pool. I mean, that's one of the great things, is that you set up the geography of this whole space in the video, and then our main characters go explore that space. That's just great setup and payoff.
Yeah.
And when they get to that pool and he's blown up, like, I knew it reminded me of something. I'm glad you said The Last of Us, because that must be what it was reminding me of.
Yeah.
I would also say it reminds me of some of the kind of like body mosaics in Hannibal, the Brian Fuller show.
Yes, yeah.
Where they will like make these tableaus out of dead bodies, but like, yeah, it's all growing recognizably out of his like skeletal structure, but it's so warped and deformed, and it's this fungal thing blown across the whole wall, and it's just, again, it's presented as so mundane, as just it's not CGI they put in there. It's just part of that set, and that's part of what sells it so much.
Yeah.
It's such an insane thing to go see. It's those moments where you really just see something surreal or terrifyingly sublime that make this movie work when it works.
Yeah, and it's the sort of the core, I think, like science fiction conceit and like aesthetic, like sort of like trick or whatever that the movie is playing with, is that like weird, like sort of uncanny version of life, and the way that like life is presented as this like the most extreme version of itself. That's like kind of what it feels like The Shimmer does, is it takes everything that's inside of it and it pushes it to its utmost extremes with like the diversity of like the biodiversity that is present, and the way that biodiversity can be mingled into individual organisms, so that like humans become plant, become fungus, become animal, and become like all these other things simultaneously, and playing with that idea like narratively, and then also just like purely visually, and the inventiveness with which they do it is so interesting to me. It's like, it was my favorite part, like the most compelling part of most of the movie, was just seeing what are you going to do with this concept next, you know?
Oh, absolutely, because it's a great concept, and it really is. It's part of why there is this tension in the movie between what is unsaid and what is said so thuddingly in the dialogue, because when the movie is at its best, it doesn't have to tell you any of this stuff. It just shows you these things, and your mind kind of goes racing through that. Like, you know, when you think about that guy who is splattered against the wall that way, and who let himself be cut open by Oscar Isaac, you know, we would think from our point of view, like, oh, that's got to be terrifying. He's being killed. But maybe he's not. Like, that's in this space, life has such a different meaning, and that, because it is something we cannot fathom or understand, and it is left so open, that is what makes it scary and effective to the viewer. And so that's why it just feels like the movie, in some moments, is just so weirdly of two minds, in it does this one thing so well in understanding how you build this existential horror in this kind of sci-fi setting, and it also undermines that with some of the writing.
Yeah, and like one scene like that, I think this is maybe a little bit past where the bear scene is. It's either right before it, it's right after it, where the Tessa Thompson character has that. I really do not like this bit of dialogue she has, where she's like, it explains that it's like, oh, like, it's what you don't understand. It's like, it's the shimmer is, it refracts everything. It's not just light. It refracts DNA, and it's like, what the fuck does that, like, that doesn't mean anything. And I feel like that was the one area where the, like, you don't need to, like, I don't understand what that line of dialogue accomplishes.
Right.
Like, it feels like it's supposed to be, we are explaining how this thing works. Refracting DNA, like, literally, grammatically speaking, means nothing. Like,
right.
So it's like, does not explain anything. It doesn't serve some sort of, like, character building point, really.
And visually, I love that scene, because the whole idea of these flower people,
yes,
you don't need to say anything about
it. Yeah,
like
it that. Yeah, exactly.
For itself.
The visual says what it needs to say about what this space does. That like I guess like maybe you want some slight clarification in dialogue if you really feel it's necessary. This like these are not literally people. That these are flowers that became like that grew in the shape of people. And it's like, and I think some of that dialogue of them being like, oh, it's like takes the whatever like bit of DNA that tells like how the cells, how to construct the human form. Like, I think that bit of dialogue is fine. It's specifically when it like has to go all the way to being like, no, like you see our radios don't work, and we always thought it was just like refracting things on the outside, but no, it's refracting everything on the inside, and it's refracting the DNA too. It's like that doesn't mean anything, and it's just like. This line of dialogue like does nothing other than it feels like it's trying to expunge some sort of mystery. It's very clunky in trying to do that, and it shouldn't even be trying to do that in the first place.
I do wonder if you could get like Alex Garland in 5 to 10 years, like under truth serum or something, and ask like, did you want that dialogue in the movie? And I have a suspicion that he might tell you there was a draft of this script that was significantly less heavy on dialogue, and there were probably a note process that was like, what does any of this mean? Because until you realize it visually, it has to be incomprehensible to anyone who's not in the mindset of it. And so I understand why it would get to the way it is, because this is, I think this movie's like heart of hearts, what it is pretty out there, even for the current wave of sci-fi, much further on a limb. Like, the closest thing is Under the Skin, which is technically, I think, it's made in Scotland. I think that director is American, but it was made with a lot of British funds. Like, it was this huge international co-production that's still, tiny micro budget, right?
Yeah.
So that's how you get that kind of thing to put together. You can't make Annihilation with a micro budget, so you have to go through a studio system, but they don't make this, even in, like, Arrival is kind of a little out there. It's nothing out of the mainstream like this, so it's a weird push and pull, but so I understand why some of it is that way, but it's also like it does mar a scene like that with the flower people, where it's like, if you all just shut up, this is such a beautiful scene, and it's shot so well, and it just because it also like it doesn't, except for maybe the bear scene where it comes in slowly, it never reveals its most terrifying or existential images like as a smash cut or anything. It just, you turn the corner and there it is.
Yeah,
and there's a very human sight element to that. But yeah, so you have the whole thing with the flower people. The bear scene is great.
Yes. You also have the Russian scientist getting dragged away in the night. Like, I think that's a pretty good tense scene where it rips through because you don't see it and it rips through the fence and all that stuff. I also like another one of the like visuals that, like, luckily there's no dialogue where someone very ham-fistedly has to say something about it, is when the Natalie Portman character is looking for the Russian scientist and discovers the deer with, like, the flowers growing out of the antlers. And it's like, that is a great fucking shot. Like, it's a great image. It's like, I want, like, a painting that is basically that. Like, it's...
Her whole journey where she goes to find the Russian scientist and comes back, it's a pretty long little sequence for what it is, because it's just her going, seeing the body, and coming back. But because it's completely wordless, it's so much about her moving through that space, it's one of the best scenes.
Yeah.
It's great,
so then I just wanted, like, to note those before we get to the bear scene, which is one of, like, I feel like the bear scene and then, like, all the shit at the very end are, like, the two big, like, movie-stealing moments.
Yes, the bear scene is a little marred for me by some of what's around it, but it is, yes, once you get the bear comes in, it is nutso, and it is good and it feels like it has earned that level of nutso by the time you get to it. And just like the sound design in that scene of how they've built because it is recognizably the voice of Russian lady, but through this just gnarly, janky filter of this, like, dying, pained animal.
This like weird skeletal bear thing that, like, half of its skull is exposed. Yeah, it is one of the most tense scenes I think I've ever seen in a movie.
It is very, very well done.
Yeah. It's just fucking. It's just like when it, like, turns around, it's like sniffing up on the Tessa Thompson characters. It's like, fuck it. It is something where it's like, it's not like this incredibly unique, original, like, construction for a, like, tense horror movie kind of scene. It's just executed to a degree I think has, like, very rarely, if ever, been done before. In a scene like that,
they push the design of the bear far enough that it is truly into the "what the hell am I looking at" zone. And I think the special effects are very good there. It has a real presence in the space.
The sound design sells the presence a lot too, because it's like the sound design's not just like the weeping, moaning, like screaming voice of the lady. Yeah. It's also just like the creaking of the floorboards that sell the weight of the bear, and it's like breath. Like, it's like you can feel how, like, the hot, just like breath on your face when it's breathing basically into the camera. Yeah. It's really well done.
I get why they have to kill the thing at the end. I also think I can imagine that scene being even stronger if it slipped off back into the night after ripping Gina Rodriguez apart. Because then it's just this, like, nightmare apparition almost. And like, I kind of felt about that, both that and the alligator, of like making them dead kind of, I don't know, it kind of undermines the horror of it.
Like, honestly, also with the alligator, while I think, like, it's cool and I like all the bits, like, it's got, like, fucking shark teeth. That's pretty fucking, I like that. But I think it's ultimately, like, makes the movie a bit weaker that they even show it at all. Like, I think if it was just something grabbed that character, I think it's Tessa Thompson character, like in that shed and dragged her into the water. They like have to desperately like rip her out, but they never see what it was. I think that would have been more effective.
Yeah, I think probably. And because there's just, no matter what, because it's a cool design for albino alligator, but whatever you come up with is going to be like, oh, what the hell was that? I also don't quite know the physics of how that alligator grabbed her the way it did.
She should have been dead. Like I don't know how her fucking like all the skin on her legs was not ripped off by that alligator.
Yes, but anyway,
that's not here today.
It's okay. Yes, spare scene, great, and then I mark everything from when Natalie Portman arrives at the coast, and there's one shot which is her looking sort of mostly into the camera, side angle. Ocean on one side, beach on the other, big widescreen composition that kind of starts this sequence of the movie. Everything from there to the end is phenomenal with a capital P.
Yes, absolutely.
Because at this point also, like, there's virtually no dialogue from here to the end of the movie. Just little things. You have Oscar Isaac on the tape talking in his weird affected southern accent that he didn't have anywhere else in the movie, which I think is actually a very intentional, wonderful detail. You have Jennifer Jason Leigh gives an inscrutable monologue, but it's great.
And then she screams the word Annihilation!
Yes, and then she goes Super Saiyan and bursts. And then you have the long sequence between the thing that comes out of that and Natalie Portman's clone person and everything that happens between them and the burning of the shimmer and then the last couple scenes back outside. But, like, I feel like we're 55 minutes into this. This should have really been the whole conversation is just this scene.
Yeah.
Because it is just... It totally feels like up there with some of those like avant-garde vignettes in like Twin Peaks: The Return or something.
Yes, yeah.
Just it's visual imagination, its ingenuity, the precision with which it is pulled off. It feels like they don't miss a single beat in this stretch of the movie. The performances are great. I think it's not just how well they pull off those visuals, but that they can even be imagined. Like the thing that Jennifer Jason Leigh turns into, and whether or not it is even there in the space, or if it is this thing that is going on in Natalie Portman's mind, like, it's sort of like the color field thing in 2001, but it's so much weirder and more alien and completely inexplicable. Every step of the way through this, I'm just, both times, riveted. I love it.
Yeah, like, it feels like the end of this movie and all that stuff that happens in the lighthouse after the Jennifer Jason Leigh character, like, annihilates and turns into basically floating energy, it is like the kind of thing that whenever someone just, like, some fucking movie bro is just like, all CGI is bad and, like, CGI is the curse of all movies and anathema to good filmmaking, it's like, no... It's like most CGI that is in every fucking movie that is made, you don't even know is there, and it's like it is an indelible and like necessary part of modern filmmaking in ways that you're not even like talking about. But also when it's like flashy and in your face, and it's like the scene is built and could only exist with the special effects. Like CGI can be fucking awesome and crazy and weird in a way that like you could not do that like evolving Tesseract like bizarre flowing thing that this Jennifer Jason Leigh character becomes in practical effects. Like, it would be literally impossible. I have no idea. The closest you could get is like doing something weird with like chemicals and water, probably.
I was going to say that. There's chemical water stuff you could do that I actually think it's very clearly based on, because that's what good CGI does. It takes some kind of physical element, and that's why I think it works. But yeah, no, the way they do it specifically, of course not. And it is an amazing effect. But there's also this consistent thing throughout this movie where I always have trouble in this film figuring out what is a CGI effect and what is an in-camera thing.
Particularly when, like, I think, like, there's, like, scenes with the thing that comes, like, the walking thing that comes out where it's, like, is it CGI or is it a dude in, like, an outfit? Like, it's hard to tell. Or it's probably a combination of the two.
It's almost certainly a combination, but I liked that I didn't know, and I think it's intentional, because I'm guessing if Alex Garland wanted to, they could have gone one way or the other more solidly of, like, it's going to just look like a person in the scene, or it's going to look like a CGI alien.
Yeah.
But it's very much like, it looks very physically present in the world, and also not, and that uncanniness to it is really essential to that scene working. So, like, there's just a fascinating push and pull in all of that. The special effects throughout this movie, like, the shimmer does not look like CGI to me. Yeah. It has to be. I don't know how else you do that. There's some in-camera things you could do with rainbow effects, but the way it moves and everything, it has to be CGI.
And the way that it's present in, like, so ever-present in every single shot.
Yeah. I will say I did notice this both times I saw the movie. I'm guessing this is a budget thing. I did notice it feels like the ideal version of this movie probably would have been shot on maybe a nicer digital camera at a higher resolution. Because I just noticed both times there's like, I think that if the image, and this is not a thing you get on film. This is a thing you have to deal with digital photography. Sort of lacks, I don't know, the kind of punch and warmth of really good digital photography or film that would fully sell some of these images to me. It just has kind of a dullness to it sometimes that I think comes from probably being shot and finished at a lower resolution. And I don't know, because I saw it on 2 screens, both 4K resolution, and it just looked a little kind of undercooked to me. I don't know what that is.
I had a similar feeling seeing it at Denver West, and I had no idea if that was like a projector thing, and it might have been like the bulb was slightly dim or something, and maybe the colors didn't pop because of that. But I felt the same way in a lot of moments in the movie.
Because there's no way they would have had the money to finish this at 4K. Yeah. Most big, huge movies aren't done at 4K. I was just reading today, Justice League. I was reading the 4K Blu-ray review of that because I'm just curious about not the movie, but those processes.
Yeah.
They're saying even that movie. They spent $300 million on that. That was finished at 2K. So this might have been finished at that or even lower. It was almost certainly not shot higher than that. I don't know. This actually feels to me like a movie that its ideal version of itself probably would have been shot on film and then had the digital stuff put in to make it fully tangible. And I'm guessing there's just no way you could have done the cost with that. Because film is already expensive today, and then merging film and digital is more expensive. And so little thing. I don't begrudge the movie for it. I just noticed that it lacks some of that visual oomph. But you forget about it in a scene like this.
Yes.
I mean, okay. First off, the Oscar Isaac tape scene. He gets in, he sits down, and you already realize, he's sitting in the position of that skeleton she saw. Because that whole fucking set in the lighthouse with the skeleton there that's burned and looks like a religious effigy or something, and then you have all the cellular structures on the walls. Yeah. It's just, and you have that hole in the ground. That's Chekhov's hole. Yeah. She's gonna go in the hole.
God, that's one of my favorite things about what they do at the end of the movie. That's one of my favorite small things is that the whole movie, because the first thing you see in the movie is that lighthouse from a distance. It's the whole movie they're trying to get to the lighthouse, and I love that when they get to the lighthouse, they're not trying to go to the top of the lighthouse. They're going under the lighthouse. It's everything else, it's about what's at the top. Because that's what a fucking lighthouse is. It's about what's at the top. And it's no, it's about what's you have to dig down underneath that. It's not about the shining beacon on top. It's about the darkness that's underneath all of that. It's so fucking good.
That almost sounds like a thematic thesis statement for the movie.
There you go. Yes. Yeah, and luckily no character had to just say that to me in this sequence.
If Russian lady were still alive for the lighthouse, she would have said everything you just said.
Yeah.
She would have turned, Natalie Portman would be like, why do we have to go below? It's because what is at the top is not as important as the darkness below.
Yeah.
Yes, it would have been terrible. But yes, no, it's all, so I love that, Oscar Isaac sits down and he starts, and I love his monologue because it's half understandable and half complete batshit inscrutable about, I thought I was me, but I don't think I'm me anymore. There might be another me.
Yeah. While we're making, endless Twin Peaks The Return comparisons, it reminds me of the scene where the one guy commits suicide behind the tree with the girlfriend character. I forget who the actor is.
Little bit,
And he's just ranting because he's high on drugs, and you catch snippets of it, and you're I kind of understand what you're talking about. It's then he says some more. It's maybe I don't.
Yeah, it's the Caleb Landry Jones character, and no, but I love it, and you start to realize over the course of the video that he's talking to someone, not to the video, to a person in the room.
Yeah,
and there's also this constant tension, especially once you see the movie a second time, of who's the real, Sergeant Kane? What happened to him? Is it okay to even say there's a real and a fake one? Or one is the clone and one is the original body? Because they seem... Because he also is so accepting of this. I'm going to take a... Once he starts something you ever seen a phosphorus grenade go off? It's shield your eyes, it's pretty bright. And again, with that, the southern accent comes out of nowhere with him in this, and it's so great. And he just holds the phosphorus grenade. He pulls the pin. I think it's smart to go to a shot of poor Natalie Portman, having to watch her husband immolate himself.
Yeah.
And then back to it, he's just holding it, and he looks up, and he just lights on fire, and it's such a powerful image. And then another Oscar Isaac comes in, and it's the one from the beginning of the movie
with the weird slick back hair, fucking slick ass Oscar Isaac.
Yes, when Oscar Isaac has slicked back hair, he's up to no good.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how you know.
Yeah, when it's like free, he's unkempt and free. It's like I'm gonna follow this dude to the end of the world and slick it back. It's like that's what's gonna happen in the next Star Wars movie. He's gonna fall to the dark side. Fucking like put some product in his hair and slick it back. It's like, oh no, that's who the real Snoke is, motherfucker.
That's what I want to happen. Is Kylo Ren seduces Oscar Isaac to the dark side, and he hands Poe a thing of hair gel, and that's how you know. He holds out his hand with hair gel in it. No. But yeah, that whole video, and then you come back out of that, and now you know why the room is the way it is. You know that, and again, something happened to Oscar Isaac, and you can put the pieces together and we can make our theories, but I love that it is so just split up and bifurcated. There's no way to fully say what the hell went on in there.
Yeah.
You know? Because it was clearly, again, a very different experience. Natalie Portman goes into the hole. Jennifer Jason Leigh annihilates. The imagery of, as you say, the pure energy and the thing that comes out, the music at this stretch, which we played a little bit of early on as our theme song, is so good. And she has that whole game where she's like mirroring the thing. And it becomes like this choreographed almost dance kind of thing going on. Yeah. It has all these, I love that it takes its time going through all this. It's pure filmmaking, and it's so good. Yeah,
and it's one of those of, especially now that I'm getting into teaching, like whenever I see something, like I make a mental note of like, hey, man, if I'm ever teaching a class and we're talking about Freud and the doppelganger and the uncanny, fucking bookmark this scene, because holy shit, it's perfect.
If you want to teach about Freud and the uncanny and you want to scar your students.
Well, I mean, that goes without saying.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good point. What scene about Freud and the uncanny could you show that wouldn't scar your students?
Yeah, that is a good question.
If you wanted to do it right.
Yeah, but this scene is so just mesmerizing between everything, like the sound design, the music, just like the cinematography and the acting and just the way that they mirror each other. But it's not exactly them mirroring each other, which is another one of the areas where it's like, I can't tell, is that an actor? And so like they would never be able to perfectly mirror each other because it's like two people trying to pretend to mirror each other. Is it a CGI thing? And it's like they're intentionally making it slightly out of sync. It's like probably both. Like
it feels so intentional because like if you could fully pin down what's happening in this scene, it's worthless at that point because that's not the point. Like, you know, this is an interesting alien invasion movie because they are truly invaded by something alien in that you cannot, it is not of this earth, it is not of human perception, you know? And that's what makes these kinds of ideas, especially at this stretch of the movie, so, you know, powerful and piercing, you know? And yeah, all the stuff with the doppelganger and that it's also themed through visuals, right?
Yes.
It's Natalie Portman at this point. It's a confrontation with another self. It is an act of literally another self-immolation that it's only in the moment when she puts the fucking, you know, phosphorus grenade in that the clone becomes Natalie Portman, perfectly cloned. She even clones down to like the streak of blood in her face and everything. So by the time she immolates, it's not even clear anymore which one is which, almost, you know? Yeah. I mean, the geography of the scene makes it clear, but there's like a moment where you get confused. All of that. And that the Natalie Portman who walks away from that scene, because no one's been talking, because no one's been... We're just watching these events unfold, you can't exactly say what is in her mind anymore. What has she drawn from this experience? What is still left of her in there?
Yeah.
It is just a visual symphony, and it works perfectly.
Yeah. And then particularly it's the moment where she rushes towards the door, and the thing rushes also and is crushing her against the door.
Visceral,
and she can't breathe. Like, I think because that's the moment where it's like... Because, you know, like, you can have a scene like this and it would be like, oh, it's like uncanny and weird, intense, and like plays with those things, and it's kind of surreal with the music and everything. But like, I can see a version of that where like it doesn't know what to do with that. Like, it's like this is a great image, but we don't know where to go. And like, and that was kind of like where I was sitting of like, where the fuck is this? Like, how do you develop this idea beyond where like that's not just like a cliche sort of like doppelganger clone thing that, you know, is in a million sci-fi stuff. And I think that moment where she rushes towards the door and the thing rushes after her and is crushing her against the door is when I think it like it impacts that, like, the themes of self-destruction and depression and suicidal behaviors and thoughts and feelings. Like, that's where I think it, like, fully connects that together. And just, like, that sense of this old or new self, or this, like, other self, is this weight that is just crushing her, and she doesn't know if she wants to be her, like become the new thing, be the old thing, and, like, you know, the like experiences and traumas that she's experienced and how that is transforming her is crushing her, but is also, like, that's what she needs to become in some ways. And it's like, I think it leaves so much up to your own interpretation and what you want to bring to that scene in terms of what you get out of it, while also feeling like it is saying something powerful.
And what you bring out of the scenes with the Oscar Isaac and her and the flashbacks, and with the character who she's having the affair with, and that, you know, it all kind of keeps coming back to that affair that she has, but it's also, none of those flashbacks, I think, are reducible just to infidelity, and all of that is carried forward in the movie. Yeah, it's, again, when this movie is operating on, like, pure visuals and audio, it is a visual symphony. It's like a good piece of music. You can't concretely point out exactly what it is saying at all times, but that's why you can draw so much out of it, and it feels so precise in that sometimes imprecision of what's going on. You know, it's not always completely clear, but you're right. That image of her getting crushed by her own self is extremely powerful, whether in the moment you know exactly what it means or not.
Yeah.
And I just, again, it's why this, you know, I said earlier I didn't maybe like this movie. I do like this movie. I want to be clear. I like this movie a lot. Where do I come down on, is it the best version of itself it can be? No. And is it a compromised version of itself? Yes, because the things it does best are sometimes squashed by its own other self, you know?
Yeah.
And it has that own duality to it, too. And that's okay. Movies don't have to be perfect, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, this still, I think, for me, like, I thought Alex Garland was... I've always thought he's an interesting writer. Thought he was a very interesting director after Ex Machina. I don't think this is as good a movie on the whole as Ex Machina. I think its highs are higher. I think that last half hour is higher than anything in Ex Machina. It's not as cohesive a film. It makes me so excited for him as a director just into the future, though. Like, he's the real deal. He is not a one-hit wonder. He's not someone who, you know, writes and then gets into directing and proves to not be that interesting a director. I think he has a really clear directorial voice and an essential voice for sci-fi. And I hope this movie getting kind of buried is not the end of the road for him on that level.
Oh, yeah, no, because I like it quite a bit, even with, like, its clunky stuff. Where there is one more, you know, as is perfect for this movie, I feel like there's one more piece of really clunky dialogue after this when you go back to the interview with Natalie Portman and its character, and they're, like, interrogating her about, like, the thing, and it's like, and so it tried to attack you. It's like, no, I don't think it tried to attack me. I think it was trying to mirror me in some way. It's like, I know! Like,
yeah, no, that's...
like, why is this line of dialogue here? It's so pointless.
That's a little clunky, but right after that is one of my favorite exchanges where Benedict Wong keeps asking her questions, and she says, I don't know, to every one of them, and it's essentially the end of the movie at this point. And there's something so subversively awesome about a, you know, theoretically big Hollywood sci-fi movie where the end is the character going, what about this mystery? I don't know. What about this mystery? I don't know. What about this? I don't know. Like, there's just something about that like the character giving you verbal confirmation of the I don't know, I think is a really good note to essentially verbally end the movie on.
Yeah.
Because it reinforces that unknowability. And then you go into that final scene with Oscar Isaac where they embrace and her eyes are shifting and, you know, they have both transformed. I thought of this also as, like, they've become these aliens' new Adam and Eve figures almost in their own little scientific Eden of now, like, the you know, this invasion was successful because this couple was completely transformed, and maybe the shimmer was never the focus, you know, because that shimmer burning down is an amazing series of images, we should say.
Yeah, and, like, the crystal trees crumbling and all that,
But it also feels like, you know, if they didn't want it to burn down, they probably wouldn't have let it. To some degree, you know? Like, I think they might have accounted for the phosphorus grenade at some point.
Sure.
And it feels like they got what they wanted anyway, if you want to go that concrete with any of it.
Yeah,
know?
But then it's also just like I like the point of, because I feel like the movie is pretty visually clear that like the Natalie Portman that we followed into the lighthouse is the Natalie Portman that comes out.
Yes, no,
and,
totally.
like, yeah, like, it's not like she is not the doppelganger. The doppelganger was destroyed, but the point isn't that like she was replaced. It's that like no matter what happens, like she is transformed by the experiences, and like she can't go back to being the person that she was before, because like she's carrying this trauma, this depression with her.
It's a perfect ending for this kind of movie because it works thematically, aesthetically, narratively, all in complete utter tandem.
Yes,
right.
And it is like an ending that then you're going to get a bunch of annoying people like having the argument about like no, like it's like it must mean that she was actually an alien person. It's like fuck it, that's not. I don't give a shit.
No. Also, this movie has the best fucking end credits. Those like swirling colors, like it's a kaleidoscope. That alone, take out the credits, leave the music in because I love the music. Great little avant-garde short film, like animated short. It's just fucking great. Like that. I both times I just sat through the credits to watch that. It's so good.
Really good. I was hoping for a post-credit scene at the end of the swirling credits
where Samuel L. Jackson comes in as they're embracing and says, "We're building a team."
No, where Chris Hemsworth pops up and is like, "Jane, you've been through some weird shit." And he's got like, it's like, I know, like, I've fucking cut my hair, I got an eye patch, like, I've been through some stuff.
I think
there's Thanos is coming down, we need your help, but maybe you sit this one out, Jay.
I think, Paramount, when they saw the movie finally, they were like, fuck, we're contractually obligated to release this in North America, we're going to sell it to Netflix everywhere else. I think what they should have done is sold it to Marvel, just renamed and like dubbed it. She's Jane Foster.
Yeah, Jane Foster in Annihilation.
You have it had her be Jane. Just leave the rest of the movie the same. It's Jane Foster. It's Marvel. So you just get people in, and then yes, mid-credit scene where Chris Hemsworth busts in, and that's the connection to Marvel. And then he like slowly, like Homer Simpson going back into the bushes. He's just like leans out of there. He's like, "Alrighty, that's enough of that." And we continue on. I think that would be the best version of Annihilation.
Yes, I agree. It would solve all my issues with the exposition and everything if Thor showed up at the end.
Tessa Thompson can also just be playing Valkyrie from like an alternate timeline or something. Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we have fixed Annihilation. We figured out how to make this movie perfect.
Yes, it turns out it was a lot easier than we thought at the beginning of this podcast. I feel like we've gone on a journey.
I think Chris Hemsworth could solve a lot of the world's problems.
I agree. He is an attractive, funny man.
I don't know if I want to end it there. He had nothing to do with this episode.
But he has something to do with every episode as long as I'm on this podcast in my heart.